Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm sorry for the long delay in posting any video at this point. Personally, I didn't really feel that 7.1 really required any further videos past what we already did. And after also having found out that with 7.1.5, a bulk of what we were learning for 7.1 was going to be kind of nullified, didn't really see a point in actually going ahead and pursuing it any further. So I decided to scrap the this actual rotation video I wanted to do as kind of like a follow-up to my previous discussion video. Kind of put that on the shelf. So that all aside, I'm glad to be back here. I want to get more regular with this. 7.1.5. That is the big hoo-ha for all the actual mages at this point. I know, and I heard it time and time again, people were like, oh, the fire mage is going to get nerfed into the floor, they're going to be worthless. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing them be just as competitive as they were before. Arcane got a nice lovely amount of buffs there to themselves, and more so, it's just the spells changed. Our talents are completely, you got a nice variety to pick from. And then Frost on their end, I mean, not really much change. They just, they got a lot of spell buffs. But we're here to talk about the Arcane Mage. So, first and foremost, I just want to put it out there. I am not the world's best, on point, perfect mage. I have a good game plan. I'm not perfect on anything. With that being said, this is the build that I was personally going for and what I've enjoyed doing. And I want to share it with you guys. I've done my guide on Alter Time, and I feel like, on the forum there, I've got it pretty nailed down, but I really got to clean it up. Verbally, I think it's easier to explain what's happening in my mind. Typing it, sometimes things get, conveyed incorrectly. So, first and foremost, I just want to go through the talents. So, for tier 15, I am going with amplification. This all kind of ties into a slow but steady build that I like to go with. Arcane Familiar just gives you that nice mana max, so it's an increase, but in what we're doing here, it's not really making a difference. You could have low or high mana right now, it really doesn't phase us at all. Words of Power, because we're not trying to straddle that line of keeping high mana at this point, you're not getting the full advantage out of it. So Amplification for me right now seems to be the way to go. I'm sure the other two have their places with other variant builds, but with what I'm doing, I'm not seeing it be really valuable. For the level 30, I think this is up to you. You have the choice, dealer's choice. You get to choose what you go with. So, me personally, I'm in a bit of a bind here. I could go with Slipstream, so I have the mobility for arcane missiles and for evocation. However, I also have Norganon's Foresight, the boots, the legendaries. So I stand still for 8 seconds. My next spell can be cast within 5 seconds for, no movement restrictions. What I'm finding tends to happen, like example, if I'm like fighting hell again, I'm standing in the wrong place and I get popped up in the air, I'm finding that when that occurs, oftentimes if it happens during an evocation, my evocation doesn't get interrupted. And then I start freaking out. I'm like, did I choose the wrong passive? And I'm like, no, I still had Shimmer. And it's just because Norganon's Foresight caught it. Because when I'm sitting there going, hog wild on my actual character, I'm not thinking about move left, move right, move this, move that. I blink where I gotta go. I try to stay stationary. So oftentimes, evocation tends to be saved by that at this point with the new revisions they did to it. So I'm just going to kind of call it as I got lucky with it. I'm sticking with Shimmer for right now. However, I can definitely see people getting benefit out of Slipstream if they don't have Norganon's Foresight. So yeah, dealer's choice. Mana Shield, really good for out in the world and running around, if you're taking a lot of hits and you don't really care about your mana. I think it's very good for farming and stuff. And, PvP, stuff like that. 45. That there is a nice contestable set of talents. So, mirror images have been up, down, left, and right argued about. So, mirror images has been a bit of a contention at this point. It's a contender for damage. It actually does put out good at this point. However, I don't believe there's enough data yet for us to understand fully how to utilize it properly. I've never really had much of a use for it since it became a talent. I've always kind of gone with Rune of Power because it just overall has always been better. Now, my understanding of mirror images is that, obviously per the tooltip, they just cast spells and that's it. However, I'm hearing reports that for like fire and frost, they're casting combustion, they're casting icy veins. So I think the big question comes in, are they actually going ahead and casting arcane power? Because if they are, then that's a big to-do, and we need to find out, do they only cast it if you had arcane power at the time you summon them? Do they cast it only if you have it off cooldown? I mean, I don't know, and I can't say for certain. Honestly, I can't really say I've seen them do any of these things. I feel like I've caught them doing spells I don't normally see them doing, like outside of Arcane Blast. But again, I can't speak to it 100% yet. So I'm going to leave that up to people that are very versed in that, and if I happen to get some time, I'm going to try to sit down and figure that out. But yeah, I mean, they're a nice set it and forget it, but mirror images, I just don't really think edge out Rune of Power just yet. Incanter's Flow, just as a side note, everyone's always like it's a mobility thing. I also think Incanter's Flow can supersede Rune of Power if you are one of those persons that know how to time up everything properly. If you wait for the stars and moons to align and you pull it off every single time, you can pop off 20% on every single attack. That's very, worthwhile. But I don't think any of us really are. It's a little illogical to be thinking that way. So, Incanter's Flow, keep it for movement. Otherwise, again, it's like a set it and forget it. You choose the passive, you don't worry about it. Rune of Power, love it or hate it, it's kind of there to stay. Yeah, I got a 10% nerf down to 40% at this point. And, even though it has the visuals, a small circle, it actually extends about half the radius outwards as well. So you have a bit more room that will really lens out to be. So, Rune of Power, that's my 45. Talent 60. I'm sitting there and I'm looking at Supernova and I'm like, it got a 20% damage reduction on its spell power. It's the same old spell that we've had forever and a day, and personally I'm just kind of bored with it. I would like to try something different. And when I was testing things out on the PTR, I kind of felt like, okay, let me try Charged Up. I feel like, it's something that only kilt wearers got to use, so I wanted to try it for myself. Resonance, it was brought to my attention because I guess I just overlooked it, that it gives a flat line plus 25% damage to your Arcane Barrage, and then 25 for, it's 25 for every target hit, so you're always hitting one. I guess I kind of read it like it was Arcane Rebound, where you have to hit two. Either way, if you're using Barrage extremely frequently, then yes, I think Resonance is the perfect way to go. I don't actually use it as frequently as one would expect, so for me, Charged Up tends to be the better bet, because 40-second cooldown, I can go ahead and blow out my Barrage just to get a little extra damage in there, and if I get a good proc for AM right afterwards and follow it up with an Arcane Blast, and I happen to have 2 procs of Arcane Missiles, I have 1 stack of Arcane Charge at that point. What am I going to do? Sit there and wait? Screw it. I'm going to hit Charged Up, boom, and I'm going to blow out those 2 missiles right into the target and then clear it again. So it gives me that little extra push when I'm not in a burn. It's like a little tiny baby faux burn, So the 75 talents, I think those there are completely up to you guys. Ring of Frost, unfortunately, it doesn't really affect a lot of minions and stuff. Not minions like trash mobs. I'm talking like during boss fights. It doesn't really affect a lot of things out in live. So I'm kind of like, it's a spell that I don't really get to use. Ice Ward, however, it tends, it's your Frost Nova. I tend to see things be more affected by Frost Nova than Ring of Frost. So I've always been very fond of Ice Ward. But I'm playing around with Chrono Shift because in the event like Hell Yeah, where I need to get from point A to point B fast, and let's say I choose Slipstream, I don't have double shimmer. Or if I'm on the top of a staircase, you can't blink down a staircase. We all know how that works. You blink an inch in front of you, and you get stuck. So Chrono Shift is a nice little reprieve, especially because now we have the ability to use our barrage. And not be like, oh my god, I wasted my stacks, they're gone, I'm done for. So moving on from there, I don't want to let this go past what the video is showing here. The video isn't correlated to the talk. I'm just kind of like, talking over what I'm showing, what I'm doing. So my 90, you got Nether Tempest, Unstable Magic, and Erosion. Erosion, it stacks, 8% damage increase, 1% per hit, and it decays after 3 seconds of not doing anything. So good talent choice overall. I feel it's very strong for single target where you're going to be focused on that target. It can be applicable in AoE, but it has ramp up time. And that kind of goes into the rotation in a moment, and I'll explain why. Unstable Magic, good for single target. It doesn't have a ramp up time, it's just a 20% chance. And it got a buff. It went up to 20% chance for the proc. I think it was 15. I want to say 15 before this. I totally forget what the exact was. But, a perk is a perk, and it's nice to have on the side. It has a nice cleave to it. It does decent damage. I think single target, if you're focused on that target, Erosion is better. Like, Hell Yeah is a lot of single target fighting, and then you got little bouts of AoE in between. So I could say go with either of them if you really wanted to there. But that's my own personal opinion. I like Erosion. Nether Tempest, I think, is only going to be really viable if you have a high amount of haste, of which you probably saw earlier in the video, I have like 12%, so not really viable. And we'll move on from there. Level 100. This one here is it's a simple, cut and dry. I'm actually going to read it from right to left. Arcane Orb. It went from 80% spell damage to 500% spell damage. It is fantastic for AoE on grouped adds where you don't have charged up selected. So, Mythic Plus. Phenomenal for there. I haven't had a chance to really play with it or anything like that. I've done some regular Mythics and dabbled with it. It's really nice. Mythic Plus, I got to get my butt off the ground and really get in there. But I can see where it really synergizes with Resonance. So it's pretty much a 20-second charged up if you hit enough targets. And even at that, you're going to be doing Arcane Explosion, Arcane Barrage, using the Resonance and Arcane Rebound talents to kind of really clamor in an explosion like all holy hell. So those two, they go hand in hand. I can't see anything other. Temporal Flux, I feel, is if you want to be a speedy caster again, it gives you a little bit of what we had with Quickening, but doesn't give you the full thing. It's actually very similar to how we were back in Cataclysm range. I remember Cataclysm and way back with BC when we first got Arcane Blast, it was always affected by the amount of cast that you had. Speed was a big thing. You cast it more and more, you get faster. And then Cataclysm, it kind of gave you a cap. I know there was that book off Archimond in Draenor, where if you got it, you can gain speed on your Arcane Blast when you had Arcane Power up and active. So it's one of those ones. It's a nice throwback to what it was for Arcane Blast. It doesn't fill the void in the heart of just, blasting out as fast as humanly possible, but it's still very nice. I see it synergizing very well with haste in general, and it's almost to an extent where I would say, haste is possibly, do not quote me on this, possibly on a more level playing ground with mastery if you choose that. But that's for a different video, a different investigation, a different time. Overpowered, that's what I'm going with. So what's there to say? 70% increased damage, negative 70% cost, and yeah. I mean, I think the base arcane power is 30 and 30, so you're getting a 40% increase there. I mean, you can't really complain. It's raw power. So yeah, just a quick top-down amplification, shimmer, slipstream, whichever I prefer, rune of power, charged up, chrono shift or ice ward, erosion, overpowered. That's what I'm going with. Now, for what I'm doing, how I'm actually attacking and everything like that, I when I first start off, you probably have already seen at this point. I work myself down to about 50% mana. By the time I get there, I have 8 stacks of erosion. Now, granted, I think I overcasted one of my Arcane Blasts. Basically, I had 3 stacks of AM, and I went ahead and casted another AB at that point. So it's like, if I had gotten a proc, that would have sucked, and, hey, it happens. Um, but with that, though, I found that getting to about 50% mana, Mark of a Lunith, Rune of Power, clear your arcane missiles, and then arcane power and start flinging blasts at them. If you get to 3 stack of arcane missile during the few seconds that arcane power is active, kill off 1 or 2 of your stacks of arcane missiles, depending how far you are from the actual end of the arcane power. Leave enough time to hit presence of mind and add in 1 or 2 extra free not free, but insta-cast shots of Arcane Blast before the end of your timer. Okay? By doing that, you're getting as much as you can into that overpowered phase and utilizing as much of that negative 70% as you can. After that, it's just about getting yourself down to low mana, popping your evocation, getting topped off, and then just pretty much it's almost to an extent carefree. I found that you can cast in really any direction you want. You can, build up to 4 stacks, clear, after using any type of free cast that you had. You can do 2 stacks, cast anything free, and then clear. And they both tend to get the same results. I literally, on my playthrough here, I have struggled to keep above 350 on the DPS meter. Now, granted, my overall damage done is just shy of 100 mil, but it's one of those ones. I feel like you can kind of get away with a lot more and just kind of choose your own play style. The only things I can say is that it seems like, if something is off cooldown, use it. I kind of, with the way this all went down, I kind of didn't end up jiving up my Mark of a Lunith with my Rune of Powers. But I think it's something that we can kind of overlook sometimes when the really need calls for it. I would prefer to have 2 Runes of Power ready for dumping AM than for Mark of a Lunith. Nothing personal to Mark of a Lunith. It's a great spell. You look on any of our damage charts, it's not our main damage dealer. Missiles, blasts, those are our main damage dealer. And in all my testing so far, Arcane Blast supersedes Arcane Missiles. Arcane Missiles, while they still hit hard as hell, physically, you're not casting them as often. So, but basically it just kind of comes down to you're kind of weaving things in and out, doing whatever kind of pops up at the time and just kind of making use of it. The one trick that I'm using is, if I see Touch of the Magi pop up, and you probably noticed it's a little red bar on the left-hand side of my weak ores there. If that pops up, and let's say I have like 2 or 3 stacks of arcane missiles, yeah, I dump into it as normal. Sometimes I don't have that, so I'll dump what I can in, and just before it ends, I'll fire off an arcane barrage, and then charge up just to get back to where I was with my arcane charges. Another thing is, if I go to clear my arcane charges by using barrage, and let's say I get a proc of arcane missiles. Okay, well, it's only 1. Cast Arcane Blast. Oh, I got a second. Well, hell, I've got 2 arcane missiles there. Let me use charged up. That way I don't have just 1 charge. I have 4. And then I can dump 2 arcane missiles into the target, clear, and then go back to my little bit of a conserve kind of phase. So, overall, I think the Arcane Mage is in a good place. It's definitely not as, I would say, it's easy to get into, but it's not as easy to master. I know a lot of people are like, hey, Warcraft Logs has us as the lowest possible known to mankind. It's still within the first week. There's not as many parses as you're going to expect of actual mages out there reporting every little action they've done since. So it's hard to say that that is a sizable audience that we can say, hey, when we census this, we're going to get a lot of, really good results. Give it some time before we start making that decision. I mean, if I pull up just, normal Helya for 715, I already see an Arcane Mage within the top 20. And then, I see Frost down there too. Granted, I don't see more than one mage in the top 100. But, in light of it all, I mean, we're in the top 200 twice at least. Three. I think we're in there about 3 times at least in the top 200. So, given how many classes there are and how much, crap we've had to deal with as Arcane has gone, I think that's good. I mean, do remember that, Fire has always been the more favored for Legion. People really loved Fire more than they did Arcane. So I expect to see more Fire mages, wanting to hold on to what they had. So, but I digress. Don't get too bent out of shape about the logs right now. It's still way too early to really say exactly what's going on. I will say this. The damage itself is there. The DPS seems to fluctuate. I get high highs, and then I plateau, and it decays quickly. But once it decays down to about that 350, 400 range, that's where it kind of levels out, and that's where I tend to get stuck at. I think for us, the biggest thing is going to be coming out of that little rut, finding out how to really improve on that and get ourselves back up so we get a nice peak again. But, anywho, I've been talking, it's like 20 minutes now, I think. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to cut this early, and at this point, I think, let's just keep the conversations going. I am an open book. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you saw this and you're like, hey, Rue's an idiot. He should have been doing it this way. Let me know. Just don't be a jerk about it. Don't come to me and say there is no other way. This is the only way. Literally, have a conversation with me. I'm fine with it. Outside that, I'll have my battle tag in the description. I'm on the Alter Time forums. Look me up. If you add me to battle tag, don't be alarmed if for any reason you get, defriended. It's just because I have so many friends on there right now from all this. I'm having trouble keeping up with my own personal friends. So if you get defriended for any reason, don't take it personally. Just, add me again if you got another question. That's all. It's nothing personal. All right. But other than that, Nighthold comes out on Tuesday, folks. Let's go in there and see if we can't not show people how it's done and really make a name for ourselves. Okay? Outside of that, enjoy and be good.